Next on Currents News, a deadly discovery inside the home of an abortion doctor. Thousands of human body parts are found, all medically preserved. An outrageous attack against a Catholic church in Queens. Stations for the rosary are ripped apart. The damages are very costly.
Now the NYPD is investigating. That's only part of the story. I'm Tim Harfman. I'll have much more coming up.
The maker of OxyContin, Purdue Pharma, is filing for bankruptcy protection. The drug is at the center of the opioid crisis, and the company is facing thousands of lawsuits. Plus, death threats in the Bahamas. Haitians are being blamed for Hurricane Dorian. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Tamara Lane. There are demands tonight for a full-scale investigation after the death of an abortion doctor in a Chicago suburb. We want to warn you, this story is uncomfortable. Inside the doctor's home, thousands of aborted infants were discovered. The human remains had been medically preserved. Currents News' Emily Drewby reports the latest.
A house of horrors. Over 2,200 aborted infants found in the home of now deceased abortion doctor Ulrich Klopfer. The bodies were discovered just south of Chicago by Klopfer's family. The remains had been medically preserved. Catholics and pro-life activists like Jackie Appleman are demanding an investigation into Klopfer's activities at 3 of his abortion facilities.
Klopfer was responsible for over 30,000 abortions. So the fact that they've only found 2,000 remains makes us question where are the other remains.
Appleman claims Klopfer's clinic in South Bend, the women's pavilion, closed in 2016, but he continued to visit the location every week until he died. That same year, the Indiana Medical Board suspended his license for 6 months over problems with his practice. Controversy surrounding Klopfer's abortion practice for years. In 2012, Indiana's Attorney General opened an investigation of Klopfer for not keeping proper records and for not having the right staff at his facilities. He had little to say when confronted by a reporter.
You've said that these were simply clerical errors. Do you still feel that way?
Yes.
He was charged in 2014 when he didn't report an abortion performed on a 13-year-old girl.
We're all human beings. We all make mistakes, and we have to deal with the consequences, okay?
Appleman says in addition to the demand for investigation, her group Right to Life is also working with authorities to give the infants a proper burial. Right now, the remains are with the coroner.
Thousands of women are impacted by what Klopfer did to them. He has their children in his garage. And so I want to offer a note of hope and healing.
An investigation into the 3 clinics has not yet started. Appleman tells Currents News that Right to Life will be holding press conferences over the next 2 days to push for that investigation. Emily Drewby, Currents News.
The news about Klopfer recalls the notorious case of Kermit Gosnell. He was convicted of murdering 3 infants who were born alive at his abortion clinic in Philadelphia. And he was found guilty of manslaughter when a woman died during an abortion. Gosnell was also convicted of more than 200 other abortion-related charges. He made a deal with prosecutors in 2013 to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Turning now to a series of attacks against a holy place in Hollis, Queens. The Shrine Church of St. Gerard Majella has been vandalized twice in just 1 week, and the pastor believes the same person is responsible. Currents News' Tim Harfman is standing by at the church with the latest. Tim?
That's right, Tamara. There have been 2 attacks within the past week. The latest happening last night when rosary stations like this one were destroyed and thrown into the trash. The religious images were attached to the wooden platforms you see behind me. The attacks were caught on camera, and now the NYPD is investigating. Take a look at this surveillance video. A bizarre attack on the Shrine Church of St. Gerard Majella late last night. An individual believed to be a woman dressed in all white, ripping 20 rosary stations from this outdoor shrine in Hollis and throwing them into the trash.
Oh, it's a punch in the stomach.
Father Joseph Jude Gannon is the pastor of the Hollis Queens Church and showed us the damages. The individual also broke part of the sprinkler system and somehow managed to cut part of this metal handrail.
I would consider it a hate crime. I don't know what the legal classifications are and things like that, but I think it's a direct attack against Mary and against the parish and against the church in general.
The NYPD is investigating. They have yet to determine if the act is considered a hate crime. The Queen's priest believes there is over $10,000 worth of damages. The rosary stations were crafted in Italy and dedicated about 2 years ago, thanks in large part to donations from parishioners. The shrine was part of the Generations of Faith campaign, a major fundraising effort across parishes in Brooklyn and Queens to support the diocese and their individual churches.
And this is an area that was developed by fundraising from our people for a very important campaign. And now we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and re-get all of these again and refix them.
But this isn't the first time the church has been vandalized. It's believed the same woman is behind a similar incident last week. Video capturing the individual ripping this sign off the gate of the outdoor shrine and tearing the parish's name from these potted plants. And another individual was arrested last year for stealing $4,000 worth of guitars from the church. Marie Kashmir is a parishioner who says she prays in the outdoor shrine because it's easier for her mobilized scooter than going into church.
That's not good. Why do they have to do that? You know, that's wicked. We need peace. Why do you destroy the church?
Destroying church property, but the faith of this parish is intact.
Even this morning, parishioners were here praying, crying, but praying. And even though it's a hard day, we know that we're resurrection people, and Mary is always with us, watching over us in a special way.
And Father Gannon says parishioners are not only praying for justice, but they also want the individual to receive medical help if needed. In Hollis, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News. Tamara, back to you.
Tim, how does Father Gannon plan on protecting that area after these attacks?
Well, he says the local police precinct will beef up patrol around this neighborhood, and he's also asking his parishioners to be on alert, reiterating with the well-known phrase, if you see something, say something, Tamara.
All right, thank you, Tim. We'll continue to keep you up to date on this story. Speaking of if you see something, say something, the NYPD is asking for the public's help in identifying and catching the church vandal. Anyone with information should contact Crime Stoppers at 800-577-TIPS. The company that made billions of dollars selling the prescription painkiller OxyContin has now filed for bankruptcy. Purdue Pharma's move comes as the company attempts to shield itself from more than 2,000 federal and state lawsuits. The suits accuse the company of fueling the opioid crisis. The showdown in court could come as early as next week. The company's chairman said that declaring bankruptcy was the only way to help victims of this crisis as quickly as possible. And the victims are many. Deaths from overdoses are up among both men and women and in all races. According to the Health and Human Services Department, 130 people die every day from opioid overdoses. In 2016, the last time the organization took note, there were 47,600 deaths. The medical crisis linked to vaping-related illnesses and deaths is prompting New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to take emergency action. He wants flavored e-cigarettes pulled off the market.
We would ban all flavors besides tobacco and menthol. We're going to propose legislation next year that will ban advertising directed towards young people.
New York would be the second state to block flavored e-cigarettes after Michigan. The Trump administration is also considering a national ban. The nationwide strike against General Motors is underway at this hour. United Auto Workers walking off the job first thing this morning. The GM work stoppage is the largest by any union against an American business in a dozen years. Karen Kafa reports the latest from Washington.
The United Auto Workers Union striking against General Motors Sunday night, walking out at dozens of GM factories and facilities in 9 states, including Michigan.
My father was here and his uncle before him. 3 generations. I have children and my children will have children, and I want this place to still be around for them.
The union says GM is putting profits ahead of its people, many of whom weathered the company's struggles in 2008 and 2009, bankruptcy and a government bailout. GM says it has made an offer that would boost worker pay and make a $7 billion investment in preserving thousands of jobs, in addition to offering a solution for 2 plants slated for closure, one in Detroit and one in Lordstown, Ohio. The union says saving jobs is key to the talks.
Has always been a priority for the UAW to sustain job security in any one of our agreements, and we are going to continue to have those discussions.
Democratic Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan has 2 GM plants in her district.
I think everyone wants to get to a deal, right? People don't want to be out of work. They don't want to be on strike. They want to be negotiating and getting to some conclusion. I was thrilled to see that the parties were meeting again today.
Any deal between the union and GM will set the tone for upcoming contract conversations with Ford and Fiat Chrysler. In Washington, Karen Kafa, Currents News.
New reports are hinting that the Holy See's representative at the United Nations, Archbishop Bernardito Auza, could be headed to Spain. According to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Archbishop could become the new Vatican representative to the European country, replacing the previous nuncio who retired last July. According to sources, the government approved the appointment yesterday. A Catholic schoolgirl and her family are being remembered in prayers and with a lasting symbol in Richmond Hill, Queens. Releasing balloons into the sky, part of an emotional ceremony at Holy Child Jesus Catholic Academy. Students, parents, and teachers coming together in memory of 7-year-old Guadalupe Perez, her mother, 51-year-old Sylvia Umana, and her brother, 19-year-old Gilbert Diaz, who died in a house fire back in July. Guadalupe's second-grade classmates also on hand as family members planted a rose bush outside the academy. Desiree Salas, Guadalupe is Guadalupe's cousin.
It's really sad that at that age they lost a friend. And then, we lost someone that was that age. It's really sad that that happened, but I think the positivity from the second graders, them trying to, not even that they're trying, they just genuinely see the brighter side of it. It's awesome.
15-year-old Gabriel Diaz, the only survivor of the blaze, helped plant the rose bush honoring his mother, brother, and sister. Authorities in France have been fighting the after effects of the Notre Dame fire, as toxic lead released by the blaze contaminated parts of Paris 5 months ago. Now, a new investigation is showing just how dangerous those levels were. According to confidential government documents, authorities had indications there would be alarming levels of lead in the atmosphere after the fire. Tests now show levels of lead above the regulatory standard, some up to 60 times higher. Workers were also highly at risk as they were exposed to levels more than 1,000 times higher than the standard. Reports are accusing French authorities of putting the reconstruction of the cathedral above the health of thousands of people. There's a lot more news headed your way, including a close call in the Bahamas. Another storm narrowly misses the island. The scare comes all too soon for locals still recovering from Hurricane Dorian. And an art room gets a major upgrade. How one Catholic academy is helping to curate the next Picasso. Plus, Pope Francis made a huge gesture to a special religious leader. He gave away the bones of an important saint. Tensions are sky high tonight in the Middle East after explosive attacks against key oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. Markets shaken by how the events could impact world supply. A NASA satellite image showing the fire and smoke after missiles and drones hit the oil fields. Late today, Saudi Arabia charged that Iranian weapons were used, and United States officials are saying Tehran is responsible for the violence. Iran has denied any involvement. At the same time, there won't be any talks between Iran's leader Hassan Rouhani and President Trump next week at the United Nations. There had been word they might get together at the opening of the General Assembly in New York. That potential detente now derailed by the oil field attacks. A course change has now also derailed a new threat that was looming against the Bahamas. Hurricane Umberto, bearing down on the already ravaged islands, made a sharp turn and headed out to the Atlantic Ocean. Some heavy rain fell on the northern Bahamas, but it did not produce the disaster some forecasters had feared. The close call scared many residents who are still trying to cope after Hurricane Dorian. The Category 5 hurricane decimated parts of the Bahamas, and with much of their lives destroyed, locals are struggling to figure out what comes next. Diane Gallagher has the latest from Nassau.
Like, seriously, I have to go back to this?
Tracking another storm heading to Abaco was too much for Sita Cillian to handle.
Like, no, I don't want to hear nothing, even but rain.
Her home, along with almost everything else in the mostly Haitian shantytown called The Mud, is gone. But 2 weeks later, the lingering effects of surviving a Category 5 hurricane remain. Everyday sounds of Nassau trigger terrifying memories.
I thought it was a storm outside. When I come to the door, it wasn't nothing. The officer was like, "What happened?" And I asked him if his hurricane was there, and he was like, "No." When he looked, he said, "That's the airplane." I said, "Well, Jesus Christ."
Waiting to transfer to her third shelter in 10 days, her only focus is finding and burying the bodies of her mother and brother, who both died in her arms during the storm.
I lift my brother and literally lift him with my hand, and the other friends bring him by the road.
Now, the Bahamas' official death toll has sat at 50 for nearly a week. Sita says that number does not include her mother, brother, or a cousin, though she claims to have given the government identifying information about all three. And while she is grateful for the way the shelters have treated her, Sita does not want to stay in Nassau, a city that she and many other evacuees of Haitian descent describe as unwelcoming.
Like I say, God, I know somehow you will protect us, but we were surrounded by water.
Autolus and Agnes Pierre escaped from Abaco with their 4 children. They are now staying with a friend of his boss and trying to get out of Nassau.
We don't want to live in Nassau because we've been there and threatened house. A few people said in a video, in a voice note, said they should kill all Haitian because we're the one who caused the hurricane to destroy the Abaco.
In the days after Dorian hit, posts slandering Haitians went viral in local WhatsApp groups, cheering the destruction of their communities, death threats, and claims that the hurricane was a punishment for a belief in voodoo. When talking to us, many local Bahamians repeatedly referred to the Haitians as illegal, explaining there are deep-seated tensions between them. But government officials have said multiple times that all Dorian victims will be treated equally when it comes to disaster relief. The Pierre family doesn't trust that promise.
I would like for us, if we could get to the States for recovering until the island recovering back. So at least my kids, they could go to school.
And they'll feel comfortable.
But now with no job and important documents lost in the storm, the chances of getting a U.S. visa quickly are slim, leaving these storm survivors to fear the worst may not be behind them. In Nassau, the Bahamas, Diane Gallagher.
The Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio, is asking for donations for victims of Hurricane Dorian. He's requesting that every parish in the diocese take up a voluntary collection next weekend, September 21st. All donations collected will be sent to the Archdiocese of Nassau. If you would like to make a donation directly to the diocese, you can make checks payable to the Compostela Fund and write Bahamas in the memo section. The mailing address for those checks is Compostela Fund, 310 Prospect Park West in Brooklyn, zip code 11215. The address is also listed on thetablet.org. A Queens Catholic Academy is helping to cultivate the next Picasso. Sacred Heart Catholic Academy in Bayside, Queens just unveiled a new art room. The new classroom allows students to take virtual tours of famous museums, like the Louvre, and learn about the world's greatest masterpieces. Auxiliary Bishop James Massa blessed the new room. Bishop Massa, along with some students, spoke about the new space.
They'll learn about the artist, the work of art, but then even attempt themselves to try to sketch it. So it's just amazing.
It looks good just plain, but I think it would be better with crafts and artwork up there, because then it's like putting more pizzazz in it.
After touring the art room, Bishop Massa helped to kick off the new school year with a mass. The classrooms and churches of the diocese are strong and thriving thanks to the generosity of Catholics in the Brooklyn and Queens diocese. Now, some of those gift givers are being recognized. A prayer service at the Immaculate Conception Center in Douglaston took place under the leadership of Bishop DiMarzio. The ceremony honored more than 350 people who've given at least $1,000 to the bishop's annual Catholic appeal. They're now part of the Diocese Court of Honor, and Bishop DiMarzio is grateful.
We'd like to honor them because they really are the heart and soul of the annual appeal. They give about 1/3 of the money comes from the Court of Honor people. So they're essential to us making the goal, which is very important to the life of the diocese.
The fundraising campaign takes place each year in every parish throughout the Brooklyn Diocese and supports vocations, faith formation, and migration services, along with many other important programs. Still to come on Currents News, a massive Independence Day celebration. Fireworks, music, dancing, Mexico celebrates over 200 years of freedom coming up. Plus, the Pope gave away the bones of St. Peter. Why did he do it? The Pontiff's letter explaining it all. Today is Mexico's Independence Day. It's a celebration of Mexican heritage and pride.
¡Viva la paz! ¡Viva la grandeza cultural de México!
Large crowds gathering in Mexico City as President Andrés Manuel López Obrador chanted the battle cry known as El Grito. It marks the beginning of the Mexican War of Independence from Spain in 1810. The celebration was full of traditional music, dance, and fireworks. Finally tonight, Pope Francis has seen hundreds of leaders at the Vatican from all around the world, from all different faiths. But one recent meeting with the Holy Father was different. He gave his guests a very important gift. Peter's successor gave away the bones of the apostle. Melissa Butts has the details from Rome.
This reliquary contains 9 fragments of St. Peter's bones. It was kept in the Pope's private chapel, but Pope Francis has decided to give it to the main leader of the Orthodox Church to improve ecumenical relations. The Pope explains his reasoning for the gift in this letter that he sent to Patriarch Bartholomew I. As he knows the importance of relics to the Orthodox Church, he clarified the fragments' origins. He recalled that in 1939, Pius XII authorized a dig under St. Peter's Basilica to locate the original tomb of St. Peter. Archaeologists found it under the main altar. A few years later, the Pope writes they also identified in the same area a niche with some remains of bones that can reasonably be considered Peter. In that niche, there are still other fragments of St. Peter's bone relics. Laura Donato is one of the guides that shows pilgrims this place every day.
The relics have this importance, have the possibility to show that we are talking about a real and historical faith. Faith has its roots in history. Now, we don't talk about mythological tales, but real historical events.
As the Orthodox Patriarch already holds the relics of St. Andrew, Peter's brother, the Pope tells him that the joining of the relics of the 2 brother apostles can also serve as a constant reminder and encouragement that on this continuing journey, our divergences will no longer stand in the way of our common witness in our evangelizing mission. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
That is Currents News. I'm Tamara Lane. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.